Welcome to History 112, Lecture 7, Urban Culture. One of the key driving forces of urban culture at this time is mass consumerism, and this coincides with the rise of the middle class and the subsequent demand for products that's being driven by rising middle class wages. White collar wages, for example, rise 33% between 1890 and 1910. Doctors, lawyers, and some other professions experience large gains in not only their wages and profits but also in their prestige. Now, some other groups are going to see increases in wages beyond just the middle class. Iron workers are going to see setbacks, but they're still going to see their wages go up by about a third. Now, industries with women and many African Americans or Mexican immigrants, however, they're not going to see that improvement. They're going to see only small increases. Now, that small increase is going to be true of all industries across the American South. There, you largely don't see many gains in wages. But family incomes are going to rise nationally due to more women and children entering the workforce or by finding supplemental income through things like laundry and boarders. And that's all going to be fueling an expansion of the consumer marketplace. Now, importantly, understand that goods are no longer going to be made at home, but instead purchased through the consumer economy. Ready made clothing, for example, is far cheaper and more convenient than homemade clothing. And what drives that is that during the Civil War, there had been a massive demand for uniforms, and there had been the invention of the sewing machine. So you see these large scale factories are producing lots and lots of clothes. The war ends, and they now start to produce clothes for consumer use. And substantial wardrobes are now available to the middle class. Previously, that had been the preserve of the rich. And women's fashions also begin to be a thing. Before this, that had been something that only the rich women had engaged in. Now this is something that can be engaged in by people in general. Other goods like condensed milk and canned foods become cheaply available. Refrigeration and artificial ice freezing techniques are allowing for better food preservation, and that's going to help improve diets. And a lot of houses during this time go ahead and invest in an ice box. Chain stores are an important feature of this time. You should definitely know the names Woolworth and the A&P. Now, something like the A&P had existed before the Civil War, but are going to see really rapid expansion after. Now, these are chain stores that are going to sell things at relatively low prices in urban centers. Now, they see a lot of resistance, though, from established merchants because chains could sell things at low prices due to economies of scale. Now, what you should understand is once you start producing or buying things in vast bulk quantities, you're able to achieve a certain amount of savings through efficiency, and that allows you to, as a merchant, to then drop your prices and be more competitive, and that's going to give them an advantage over some of the local merchants, and the local merchants are going to resent that. They're also going to claim things like these big chains are going to destroy the local character of communities. In addition to chain stores, department stores begin to emerge in larger cities as well, and they're going to bring together goods formerly sold in multiple separate locations, and they're also going to likewise take advantage of those economies of scale. Now, they do some important things with these department stores. They build in tea rooms and lounges because they want to make shopping into a more social experience. And they're going to try to make it a form of entertainment, not necessity. Now, that's going to be, of course, limited to a certain segment of society that has the disposable income and the time to spend all day shopping and making a social experience out of that. But these department stores are also going to be an important source of employment for women who are going to do most of the sales work. And what they're going to tend to do in department stores is hire men for the management and women to work sales. And the women are going to be tended to be people that are very cheerful, bright, happy, helpful, who are going to make shopping and looking for a particular item a really enjoyable experience. And that's what they're kind of looking for, is to keep people in the stores all day long spending their money. Now, mail order catalog business also begins at the same time, and it starts targeting rural America, and it offers products that were generally unavailable. And they're going to offer a lot of the same types of products as the chain stores might offer, but they're going to do it with a delivery system. And two names to know are Montgomery Wars and Sears and Roebuck. Now, much advertising around new products are going to be aimed at women, so they often did the family shopping. And this is going to be see things like the beginnings of rapid changes in fashion and new household appliances and products becoming available, also new food products. This is also going to be leveraged into political power when the National Consumer League forms, and they're going to do things like try to improve wages and working conditions for female employees. And the National Consumer League is going to start making women more of a political force. And this is a really important organization considering that we are still before women have the vote in the United States. This is where they can really leverage economic power to bring about reforms. Now, There are also going to be changes in the working day and consumerism that's going to lead to new leisure activities. Many work days are starting to be reduced down to 8 hours, and nightlife and takes off, especially in forms of dance halls and movies. Now, there are new theories that are driving all this, and people start talking about what they call the pleasure economy. Economists at this time were arguing that pre industrial society is based on scarcity of goods, and therefore, in a pre industrial society, values like restraint and thrift are important because there's never enough to go around, so you had to be frugal. But these same economists started arguing that in the new American economy of the late 19th century and early 20th century, there were high levels of production, and there was an abundance of all things, and therefore, an emphasis should be placed on relaxation and entertainment to take full advantage of that and create maximum economic stimulation through consumption. Now, this new emphasis on consumption and on entertainment is going to take place at a time when there's a general increase in the level of public space and the activities taking place there. Now, understand there had always been some level of entertainment in cities. There had always been bars and theaters, for example, but the number of frequency and participation in these institutions is going to go up drastically, and there's also going to be some new forms of entertainment that are going to emerge. Also, during this time period, holidays take on a key part of public life. Big celebration days like the 4th of July are a huge deal because understand most people work 6 days per week and they had few days off during the year. So, those public holidays where you finally got a day off of work were just a welcome relief and people gathered as a big social gathering out of it. Now, there is going to be some gender divide in the forms of entertainment available. For example, women, the acceptable forms of entertainment were shopping and tea rooms by and large. For men, it's drinking and sports. Major League Baseball begins here. It's pulled together out of about 200 teams. College football takes off, although not the NFL. That's going to be in 1922. And in urban settings, boxing is going to be a popular form of nighttime sports. Now, the poor are often excluded from some of these forms, especially the forms of entertainment targeted at women. But they're always going to have access to drinking and some sports, in particular, boxing. Now, theaters are going to be one of the more popular forms of nightlife for those who can afford it, and the styles are going to range from traditional drama or opera, that's going to be kind of for the rich, vaudeville, burlesque, cabaret, which is kind of be aimed at lower class. If you're not familiar with those types of theater, think about what types of shows are available in Las Vegas, and think the entire spectrum of what's available in Las Vegas. That's the kind of entertainment that will be available there. Ethnic theater also emerges also at this time, and those tend to center on comedies. Now, movies also emerge at this point. Edison invents this in the 1880s, but initially it's only available as short, silent films through a mechanical viewing device that tend to be in bars or arcades. They're nicknamed peep shows. Those of you who have been to Main Street and Disneyland have seen these, where you put your nickel in and you get to see a movie of a waterfall or a train going by. But modern movies begin with a man called D.W. Griffith who's going to make what he calls silent epics. His most popular movie was The Birth of a Nation. For a long time, it was the most popular movie and most successful of all time. It's going to be displaced by Gone with the Wind. And unfortunately, the subject matter is a bit upsetting. This is a movie that glorifies the Ku Klux Klan. Now, during this time, though, it was hugely important and hugely popular. And the fact of its subject matter should give us an insight into how people's attitudes were at this stage. Now, dime novels are also going to be a popular form of entertainment. These are cheap adventure stories, and it's going to evolve into what's called pulp fiction. And newspapers are going to importantly transition from being local rags into national readership, and they're going to begin reporting on stories from all over the country. And there's also going to be new trends in literature, and print media is going to take off. They're going to emphasize realism and issues of the real world. Importantly, Know the Jungle, that explores the dark side of capitalism through the meatpacking industry. You're also going to see novels like The Awakening that concerns a woman who tries to find personal fulfillment by leaving her family and having an affair. A lot of authors are going to take up social causes and are going to deal with the position of women in society. So people are engaging in more and wider varieties of ideas. And again, with all of this, we should understand that there is an element of society that simply cannot afford to engage in all of this, whereas the increase in leisure time and wages for the middle class and for the rich are going to allow them to really take full advantage. Now, we should understand is that all of these new forms of entertainment are going to lead to changing attitudes, but we do have an urban population, the poor, that is excluded from a large amount of this. although they are still exposed. Now, there's another population, the rural population, that's excluded from all these new ideas almost entirely due to just a general lack of access. In the rural areas, there's just not nightclubs and theaters. It's harder to obtain books and newspapers. What's available to you is such a limited number of choices, where in the urban environment, the choices are vast. So this is going to lead to beginnings of a chasm between urban and rural populations. And during the time period we're talking about, urban populations tended to be more accepting of new scientific ideas. And we're going to get to this in a couple of lectures, but Darwinism is going to really come to the forefront of this debate that emerges between urban and rural over science. Now, urban thinking also tends to be more pragmatic. Nothing is valid unless it works in the real world, and that's going to run against a lot of existing religious ideas. Urban education also tends to be far ahead of rural areas. 31 states had compulsory education laws in effect by 1900, but rural areas tended to not fund the schools very well and did not provide a lot of educational opportunities. But in urban areas, that's exactly the opposite. Urban areas, education is used as a way to limit child labor. There's a lot of investment in it. So people are more exposed to new ideas there. Now, the federal government is also going to give away land to found colleges. Sometimes they put them near an existing urban center, but when they don't, an urban center grows around them. So the educational institutions tend to be clustered in urban environments and not in the rural areas. Now, also, another important group is women's colleges, because there were a few co ed colleges, but they don't have a big impact. But the women's colleges, when they emerge, are going to have predominantly or exclusively female faculty, and they're going to start providing educational opportunities to women that hadn't existed before, and that again is going to be something that's going to take place in an urban environment, and that's going to have long term consequences when we start talking about women's rights and the women's movement a little bit later on. So what's the big idea here? Well, rising middle class wages is going to lead to mass consumption that's going to drive the expansion of the consumer economy during this time period. Importantly, also, people have more free time and they want to do things with that free time. That leads to new entertainments. But there's a gender divide, and the poor are often left out, and the rural are mostly left out as well. And that's going to lead to an increasing rural urban divide. See you in the next lecture.